My mother doesn't know who my biological father is. Ever since I was sensible, whenever I asked this question, I was greeted with crying and slaps from my mother, so I stopped asking. I know that my mother loves me, she makes money by delivering express to support me. I know she is working very hard. The hot summer sun will crack her skin, and the north wind in winter will swell her hands. I know that my mother is very beautiful. I have seen her wearing beautiful clothes, wearing beautiful makeup, and then crying in front of the mirror, crying with makeup. She always wears ugly clothes and never wears makeup. I know she doesn't want me to ask her why, otherwise she wouldn't just dare to dress up secretly. One day, my mother suddenly asked me if I wanted a father. I knew she wanted me to answer yes, so I answered yes. She laughed, then hugged me and cried. One day, my mother put on makeup in front of me and told me that she used to be rich, but she was cheated by a bad person, so she had no money. I thought that the bad guy might be my biological father, so I asked her. She fell silent, shook her head, and said maybe he wouldn't have left if that was the case. I didn't understand it at the time, but it took me a long time to understand. Later, my mother brought a man and asked me to call him uncle. He and I were both stunned, because this man was my head teacher, so I called him Uncle Teacher. He is not handsome, he is far worse than the protagonist in the comics, he is a little fat, his eyes are not big, but his eyes are very soft. Later, my mother laughed more often, and the dilapidated home seemed to have more warmth. Mom sometimes wears pretty clothes and goes out, I think she must have gone on a date with my teacher. Later, my mother asked me if I wanted him to be my father, and I agreed without thinking. Mom smiled like a child. Later, a man and a woman who claimed to be friends of my homeroom teacher came to my house to talk to my mother. My mother didn't let me get close, I could only see them staring at my mother with contempt, and my mother lowered her head and wept drop by drop. Seeing those two demographics, I read out a few words: miss, escort, and others. In fact, I'm not stupid, I know this for a long time, but what is this? She is my mother, my mother. Later, the head teacher came in rudely. I have never seen him so scary. He roared hoarsely, picked up the kitchen knife and drove the two out of the house. I laughed, and at that moment, I really wanted to call him Dad. Later, he sat down and hugged Mom. Mom just cried. I fell asleep and woke up in the morning to find they were still in the same position. Later, he came to my house more often, it was New Year's Eve, he fed me a dumpling, and I called Dad. I hope that time will always be fixed at that moment, and there will be no later. We laughed, made noise, and watched the party. Suddenly 3 men broke into the house, clamoring for her mother to accompany her, with foul language and vulgar actions. Mum panicked like a frightened rabbit trying to kick them out of the house. Dad stood up, knocked down a man, and was besieged, and finally Dad was hit on the head with a brick and his face was red with blood. When the 3 men left, the mother was terrified and went to the hospital with the help of the unsteady father. I followed these 3 men secretly until they met the man and woman from before. It's over? This is your reward, remember to keep this matter a secret. We can't let Mr. Zhao be with that woman. He is a model worker in the city, and he is the honor of education. We can't let that dirty woman ruin him. Has the matter of Mr. Zhao's mother been arranged? It's arranged. Teacher Zhao is keeping this matter from his mother. If the old lady knows the truth, she will definitely stop him. They say it righteously, but I don't understand why. When I got home, I saw my father kneeling on the ground with gauze on his head, an old lady kneeling on the ground, my mother squatting in the corner, and the 3 of them were crying. Dad yelled, got up and walked in front of Mom, said something in a low voice, then helped the old lady to go out, and wanted to touch my head before leaving, but I ducked. His eyes made me feel a burst of waves palpitations. Mom sat slumped on the ground, her eyes were dull, and I didn't answer no matter how I called. The next day, my mother went out blankly and was engulfed by the speeding traffic. Later, I was the only one at home. The head teacher left the school, and no one spoke to me in the school. My grades were also very bad. I knew that they all looked down on me. Later, a teacher humiliated me in public, and I left a blood hole in her thigh with a pencil sharpener. Later, I left school, walked into a disco for the first time, yelled for the first time, drank for the first time, and fought for the first time. That year, I was 11 years old. Later, I became the eldest sister, very imposing. Later, I saw the man who almost became my dad on the road. I looked at him from a distance. He was very haggard, pushing a bicycle, hunched and scrawny. I cried, and at that moment, I felt that life was meaningless. Later, I should have disappeared. Since I was a child, I seemed to be God's darling, and I was beautiful with an outstanding voice. Later, my talent was noticed, and a very famous entertainment company discovered me and began to focus on my cultivation. Voice, body, dance, I grew up like a genius. The vast stage, the dazzling lights, the passionate fans, that's what my life is all about. The fans are crazy for their support, brave the wind and rain, just to get a concert ticket. I love them. I practiced hard. I want to make all my fans proud of me. On that day, the company announced that it would hold a live concert for me all over the world. Seeing the fanaticism of the fans makes me feel so happy. After the reception, in the name of planning, the president took me to a room. I was slightly drunk and walked in stupidly. There was only one middle-aged man in the room. I know him, a guy who appears frequently in Fortune magazine. Suddenly, I found that the president was gone. In that instant, fear filled his mind. The middle-aged man slowly approached me and said something. I've realized what's going to happen, and I naively thought I could stay away from this filth. But I was wrong, this concert was clearly a deal. After I signed it, there was no way out. I felt scared, I couldn't hear what he said. I just screamed hoarse. The sound shattered the glass and also shattered my vocal cords. Bright red blood flowed out into my windpipe. I fainted from suffocation. Fortunately, the tragic situation of vomiting blood protected my innocence. Unfortunately, the price of innocence was my inability to speak. When I woke up, I could only make a hissing sound. Yes, hissing, with a mouth like a serpent spitting out letters. What do I do? The concert must be held, otherwise it will face sky-high compensation. I know that the company will cleverly pass most of the compensation to me. What can I do? Only on stage. Yes, lip-syncing. Carefully lip-syncing to the world. The fans danced wildly with glow sticks. I was smiling and crying in my heart. Suddenly, the sound went silent. I have a mouth like a clown. The audience was boiling. I was stunned. Sizzle. I hide my face and leave. Later, I received gifts from fans. On slings, sulfuric acid, poison, and countless vicious curses. I tweeted. No one believes it. I was in the newspaper. No one believes it. How hard I used to be to you. You said you would support me no matter what happened. I turned my back to the sky, hissing. I am desperate. I want to leave this world. Later, I disappeared. I sat on the brocade stool and looked carefully at myself in the mirror in the red wedding dress. My personal maid, Sierra, was standing behind me, wearing pieces of jewelry on my body. My other maid, Xiao Tao, is wrapping my belongings into a small package. Grandmother and mother stood in the house, directing the maids and servants to keep busy. Today is my wedding day. My grandfather was the leader of the biggest gang in the land of chaos, the Black Red Gang, and my father was his only son. My father had a daughter like me after giving birth to 5 sons. I have been loved by thousands since I was a child. All people like me and are willing to get close to me. I grew up under the care of all my relatives and elders. But my favorite person is my griotant. My aunt is my grandfather's older sister. She is beautiful, has a gentle personality, and is highly skilled in martial arts. She knows a lot of things. I often see my grandfather discussing matters in the gang with her. Auntie was nice to everyone. When I was young, I especially liked to stay by my great aunt's side and watch her paint. Every time she paints the same person, a man. Although every time she finished painting, she would burn the painting, but I still remember the appearance of that man when I was young. It was a very handsome man with a sunny smile and gentle eyes like water. Auntie likes to go to the forest at night to watch the moon, and I often go with her. I don't understand what's so beautiful about the moon, but my aunt just likes it. In the dark of night, she is extraordinarily gentle. Sometimes she will lean on the tree trunk and hum some songs softly, most of which I have never heard before. There is a beautiful legend that a fine stone can sing, and he can give. This is the song she sings the most, like a poem. The lyrics are very happy, but in the tune she sings, I can hear endless sadness and longing. Slowly, as I grew up, I wondered why such a beautiful aunt never got married. I also asked my mother, and my mother shook her head. She said that my aunt and grandmother did not know how many people's pursuits she rejected. I went to ask my grandmother again, but my grandmother didn't know either. She said that it might be a sad thing for my griotant, so let me not ask more. Actually, what I want to know more is, who is the man in the painting? What is his relationship with his griotant? Although I was curious, I knew intuitively that my aunt didn't like to be mentioned by others, so I never mentioned it to anyone. I vaguely guessed that my aunt was waiting for the person in the painting. But where is that person? Why hasn't it appeared? When I was 10 years old, several guests came to the house, one of whom was a handkerchief from my griotant. She is very plump and always has a sweet smile on her face. She was holding a child and holding two in her hands. Standing beside her was her husband, who belonged to the Tang family of the caravan that was far away from here. I heard from my grandmother that gang leader Tang chased after his wife for 10 years, and finally brought the beauty back. It was a wonderful family, and everyone had a happy look on their faces. After receiving the banquet, the beautiful Mrs. Tang and her aunt went into the room, as if she had endless things to say. When they came out of the room, I saw that both of their eyes were red and swollen. The difference was that the aunt's face was very disappointed, while Mrs. Tang immediately saw her husband. A sweet smile bloomed. When I was bringing tea to them, I entered the room once and heard Mrs. Tang ask my aunt, "Are you really going to be alone?" The aunt said softly, "He said he would come back, I want to wait for him." Mrs. Tang sighed and said, "It is said that one day in the sky and 1,000 years on the ground, would you like him to see your old appearance? Moreover, they may never come back to that kind of place." The aunt shook her head and did not answer. After Mrs. Tang and the others left, my aunt told me that some opportunities only come once in a lifetime, and some people will never meet again if they miss them. It would be great if I hadn't been so persistent at that time. That was the only time my griotant told me about her past. I wanted to ask a few more questions, but when I raised my head, I saw 2 teardrops rolling down her cheeks. The heavy regret infected me, and I couldn't say anything for a while. Before my griotant died, I was the one who took care of me in the sickbed. She is still beautiful, but she can't hide her haggard. She told her grandfather, who came to see her, if he came, tell him, and I regretted it. Grandfather nodded, crying like a child. My aunt also told me that your fiancé is very good to you, you should cherish it, not like your aunt. I cried and nodded. The griotant has no strength to draw any more. She took the last painting out of her close-fitting jacket, as if she had taken out the best memory she cherished. The man in the painting is still young, but the aunt has grey temples. She lit the painting with trembling hands, looked at the rising flame, and asked softly as if to herself, "Where do people go after death?" She also said a sentence, which I didn't understand. She said that she always couldn't put down anything before, but she couldn't do anything well, and now she realized she was wrong. It wasn't until I was 16 that I saw the man in my aunt's painting for the first time. The griotant had been dead for 2 years by then. I recognized the man at a glance. He was exactly the same as in the painting. I clenched my fist and wanted to rush over. I would like to ask him why he made his aunt and grandmother wait for so many years and died in depression. But a question in my heart made me stop. He is as young and handsome as in the painting. But my aunt has long since passed away. Could it be that he is the descendant of that person? Next, something even more surprising happened to me. My grandfather, whom I admire most, wept bitterly at the man who appeared to be in his 20s, calling him a master. What I can't forget is that the sunny man stood in the garden after hearing the news that his griotant had passed away, and the sadness he showed made all the peach blossoms in the garden wither. It was the season of spring and flowers, but at that moment, I seemed to feel the bleakness of autumn. At that moment, I understood that he was the one who loved my aunt. I also understood what Mrs. Tang said about one day in the sky for 1,000 years on the ground. You don't have to ask why, it's just good luck. I turned around and left silently. Some things, if you miss them, you will never come back. Miss. Uncle is here to welcome the kiss. The voice outside the door pulled back my thoughts. I stood up and looked out the window. Outside the window, the flowers are blooming just fine. He came to me on the beat of the drum, and the afterglow of the setting sun reflected his smiling face, which made people intoxicated. The last chapter of Zion is over, please look forward to the next chapter of Zion. I am a writer, writing was my dream, then my livelihood, and then my lingering nightmare. I'm not a writer in the traditional sense, I'm an emerging internet writer. To be precise, I am a web writer. In the era of the large-scale popularization of the internet, the profession of online writer came into being. And I am the leader of this group, commonly known as the Great God. The day I walked out of school, my dream of writing made me join the army of online writers without hesitation. At that time, I had nothing but a laptop. My first book, in the new book period, rushed to the overall ranking of the website, and later it was sold on the shelves, published, and copyrighted. Everything went smoothly beyond imagination. Then came the second and third books, each of which had millions of subscriptions. The copyright of each book was snapped up, and each book brought me a lot of money. Later, my books needed to be pre-ordered, and even the number of pre-orders reached 18, and the speed of my coding was like an avalanche, growing rapidly and firmly. I have tens of millions of fans while getting paid for money. What a wonderful thing, isn't it? That time, even when I think about it now, I feel, how should I put it, like the best cigar between my fingers, exuding a touch of warmth. However, when writing lost the halo of a dream and became a burden that had to be done, I got tired of it. So, after finishing the pre-ordered book, I announced the closing of the pen. At the same time, in order to stop being occupied by novels, I chose to travel. But I am sad to find that I can't escape the world I knit by myself. I was drinking wine and watching beauties on the most prosperous Jinding street in the world, and a new movie trailer was being broadcast on the big screen on the street. I smiled. It was a science fiction film, adapted from my 10th book. I was watching the tide by the turbulent Lya Shore River, and people shouted excitedly in my ears, "The tide is coming. Let's see if there are any tidehead beasts." I shook my head. The story of the tide beast came from my 19th book, a novel of self-cultivation. I was watching the sunrise on the top of the beautiful Nanshan Mountain, blowing the cold wind. The big stone behind me was engraved with a line of words, a certain year, month, day, and day at the top of Nanshan Mountain. I sigh. The allusions to the Nanshan martial arts come from my 6th book, a martial arts novel. I sat in a city cafe. The piano piece played on the stage was named after my 15th book. It was a romance novel, I was silent. I was walking on the country road, the children after school ran by laughing, the fantasy novel in my hand was my third book, and I was speechless. I want to use games to numb myself, but popular online games are all adapted from my novels. Slowly, I don't want to be in contact with people anymore. I was walking in a deserted tropical desert. Dive deep in the open waters away from the coast. Burrowed in isolated primitive tribes. Trekking on untouched mountains. I avoided the hustle and bustle of the crowd at a distance. In fact, I wanted to avoid my novels. But I can't escape myself. When I'm alone, I'm obsessed with plotting the plot, and I can't help myself. Such days have passed for 3 years. 3 years later, I finally understand that no matter where I am, there is no escape from my novel, so I decided to face it. I changed my pseudonym, changed my website, and started all over again. It took me a year to go from a newcomer to a new book to becoming a website again. I changed my pseudonym again, and then changed my website. It only took me half a year to become a this time. I stopped traveling, I sat in front of the computer, and quickly ate myself into a fat man. Even so, my fingers are still flexible, and when I jump on the keyboard, it is like a elf dancing in the moonlight. The characters I typed out seemed to have some kind of magic power, and the words they condensed into were born with the power to move people's hearts. My book is selling more and more every day. My fandom is getting bigger every day. But I am more and more confused every day. I swear, I hate novels, I hate everything related to novels, I don't want to listen, I don't want to read, I don't want to think, and I don't want to write novels. But what I heard, saw, and thought were all novels. But I still keep writing novels. Fiction kidnapped my life, what should I do? Dear, thank you for your long-term support. Time flies so fast, it has been almost 3 months since 17K, and the book is about to hit the shelves. The launch of the new book is the real test period, which is a long dark age. But why on the shelves? Wouldn't it be nice to be free? Listing will lose many readers and many fewer clicks. Will indeed lose many readers, and the number of clicks will be greatly reduced. But, dear readers, you have to understand that being on the shelves is an affirmation of the performance of a book. Only when the moonlight has motivation can it write a good book of high quality. Therefore, if it is listed, it will indeed lose many readers, but if it is not listed, the consequences may be more serious, and an author may be lost. There is another thing that readers and friends don't know, the website will have a full attendance award when the book is put on the shelves. What is the attendance award? It is constantly changing every day, and the website gives certain rewards. Dear, do you want to know how many rewards are there? A friend who smokes one more benefit group in a month, and that is our full attendance reward. Rare is it? But the attendance award must be strived for. The goal is not the bonus, but the meaning of the attendance interpretation. Be responsible to the readers and the website, not be lazy, and insist on updating every day. I remember an author's little vernacular saying too well, if you stop working, you will be lazy, and if you are lazy, you will be a eunuch. This is the essence of winning the attendance award. Dear, you don't want to see a book without an ending, right? Is on the shelves, that is, you can read it for a fee. I think the parents must be tired of places with the word toll, such as high-speed toll booths. But the reasons for putting it on the shelves, as I said earlier, are to motivate the author, and the second is to bring some extra income to the author, so that there is no smoking when coding, and inspiration can't come to Kain. How much do readers have to pay to read a chapter? Some authors have calculated it, but I didn't read it carefully. I borrowed it first. It seems to be 6 cents a time. That is to say, a bottle of Nutrition Express for 6 yuan can read 100 chapters. Having said that, 6 cents is also money, and it is a shameful act to waste your money. Therefore, be sure to let the pro have a sense of value for money. How to say That is to work hard to code well and write higher quality texts than when you were free. If it's on the shelves, dear, you find that it is not exciting, and you are adding up the number of words, then please cut down Maso with tears and despise me together. My article is an infinite stream article, which combines some settings from Nightmare Stream and the original book, as well as a little bit of my own innovation. After all, the original work is difficult to surpass, and Moonlight only dares to add a little bit of her own. Bringing Beauty to Infinite, the infinite streaming work, has been recognized by so many readers, and was signed by 17K. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the web editor Leal who brought me here to snicker. She is really a very good web editor. Note that I use she. After coming to 17K, I felt the diligent efforts and ideals of the authors, as well as the care of the editors, the youth training camp, and the signing group, all of which helped me a lot. Dear, although the readers will be less after the listing, but the VIP readers will be more and more with your understanding. Support me. This article has entered the climax of the first major stage, and the more exciting content of the second part will follow. When will this be finished? I can't answer this question with time. According to the outline, it is very difficult to finish the book within 200W words, and it is very possible for 300W words. My dears, perhaps with your support, this article can become the #1 feature of the science fiction channel. Thanks to readers and friends for their strong support, to the 3 groups of authors for their encouragement, and to the editors and web editors for their care. Moonlight is here to thank everyone for supporting me until now. Whispering Moonlight Feeling on the Shelves March 31, 2013 Book Friends Group, it will be more exciting to have you participate. There are a lot of tricks in this article, first come first served. Group number, 2560981113. My dear readers, thank you for your company along the way. This article has nearly 1 million words. When I write this, do you have a general understanding of the main space of the Moonlight? Haha, the Moonlight space is divided into 2 levels. The low-level contractors can only traverse the world of reincarnation as individuals or temporary teams, while the high-level senior contractors enter the movie world as a fixed team. After Starship Troopers, the protagonist and his team members will enter the advanced main space. What does this space look like? What secrets are there in space? Moonlight will slowly reveal the answer to everyone. I remember that a reader left this article because of the relationship between the 4th volume of Zion. Here, I apologize to you. I wonder if you can see my apology. I can promise that Zion will come back in a way that no one can think of. If you see my promise, then Moonlight hopes you can come back to continue this infinite journey. This week, Moonlight's long-term persistence has been affirmed by the editor, giving me the opportunity to push a small envelope. Here, Moonlight would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the editor for the affirmation. Moonlight saw that many friends who like unlimited streaming came to Bring Beauty as a guest during this period, which gave Moonlight a lot of motivation. I hope that everyone will leave your footprints in the book review area after reading the book. Moonlight also hopes that everyone will not bother to join the official reader group of this article, 2560981113, to discuss the plot and go on an infinite journey together. Whispering Moonlight, June 28, 2013. This book review is so good. I hereby post an article related to it as a souvenir. Let's comment on the heroine in the storytelling book. This is one of the most important things a long review must do, bar none. Not counting the NPCs in the movie world, there are a total of 4 heroines fighting side by side with the protagonist in the main space. The characteristics are very obvious, and they all like the protagonists. Below, I will comment on the heroines one by one according to the order in which they appear. Zhao Xi, this little girl who has appeared from the beginning, has a lot of scenes. Smart and lively, like jewelry, and some nonsense. Please forgive me for using this word, because I really can't understand how the little girl's interest in collecting Xiniang is so great. As readers, we were able to discover the little girl's attachment to the boy pig, who is her master and elder brother, and from the fact that the boy pig likes to protect the weak, Zhao Xi, who has always been by his side, is a young and beautiful girl next door. Impossible not to charge. In this case, it is unreasonable for the little girl to spare no effort to find a teacher for herself. Of course, the little girl who is in the game may have been ignorant of her own mind all the time, which can explain her behavior. But when the girl grows up and has her own thoughts, it is too tragic to find out that the teacher and apprenticeship has been set. If there is no special reason to promote, with the protagonist's character of reconciliation, he will definitely not pierce this layer of window paper by himself. I don't know what kind of opportunity Seda intends to give this little girl, so that she can express her sincerity to the Prince Charming in her heart. Cheng Fei, this girl appeared in the second volume, and she almost had a conflict with the protagonist. At that time, she had no feelings for her, thinking that she was just passing by and making soy sauce. Who knows that the moonlight is very scheming, and it is really unexpected to set the foreshadowing so far. Cheng Fei, the girl is the queen of icebergs, she is very interested in conquering such a cold beauty, as a male prostitute. Jin Yan, this is a typical gentle girl like water. The innate spiritual strength makes it difficult for others to feel bad about her, and she is gentle and considerate, and she is a small bird. I believe that any normal male prostitution will not reject such a woman. But her character is too reserved, so she is not very prominent among so many heroines with distinct personalities. Hiccup, because the male pig is too strong, this girl also likes to find a sister for herself, which is really unpredictable. Mo Shui, this is the girl from the world of reincarnation, and the latest among the four heroines. As a contractor of the high-tech department, this girl's every move has a refreshing style, she can build an airship, and she can fight beasts, which is very pleasing. She is the servant of the male pig. This status seems to be low, but it is actually a very smart choice. The benefits are obvious. Male pigs have grown up in a world where everyone is equal and will not yell at her because of their master-servant relationship. In fact, Lin Yufei can say yes to these girls. She can be regarded as a superb male prostitute, and, with this master-servant relationship, she can always follow the male pig to travel around the world, and at the same time, she can take care of the male pig's life justifiably. Therefore, it is appropriate to be called a housekeeper. At the same time, Mo Shui's own ability makes her an indispensable fighting force by Lin Yufei's side. In addition to the above female protagonists, there is another one who impressed me the most is Xian in the fourth reincarnation world. In the end, this woman did not choose to stay with the protagonist. Anyway, since we can't accompany each other, it's not bad to forget each other in the rivers and lakes, but unfortunately we still can't let go, and we end up in a gloomy end, why bother? Although the male pig is a good male prostitute, but one day in the sky and thousands of years on the ground, it is inevitable that the promise cannot be fulfilled. Besides, the beauties around her are like clouds, and they are struggling on the edge of life and death all day long. Maybe it will take a long time to think of her by chance. So, instead of thinking about what you can't get, it's better to cherish what's in front of you. Like that Natasha is better than her, and the situation is similar to Xian, but people can think about it, what to do. Of course, considering that Moonlight greatly sympathizes with Xiangziyu, I guessed a long time ago that it would give Xian a better result. Sure enough, the 9th volume actually went to find Xian. This span is really terrifying, 4 volumes are separated. The Moonlight is really capable of this ruthless hand. After the evaluation of several female protagonists is completed, please add them to the top. Hey! The Lord of the Rings is a very old movie. Some friends may be unfamiliar with the plot and characters in the movie. Here is a brief introduction to the plot and ending of the play. Bilbo Baggins, an elderly hobbit, decided on his 110th birthday to leave his native shire and hand over all his property to his nephew Frodo Baggins. However, the only thing Bilbo had to give up was a ring that could make the bearer invisible, but according to him it was just a worthless gadget. Bilber's good friend, Gandalf the Grey, became suspicious of the ring. He desperately studied a large number of historical annals, and it turned out that his greatest fear had come true. He told Frodo of his discovery. Thousands of years ago, the Dark Lord Sauron forged the Ring of Power. He gave 3 of the rings to the Elf King, 7 to the dwarf nobles, and 9 to the humans. And Sauron secretly cast a supreme ring, which has the power to enslave the whole world. For a century, the whole world was shrouded in darkness. The Elven-Human Alliance declares war on Sauron and his army of orcs. Although the alliance suffered heavy sacrifices, it succeeded in driving Sauron back to Mordor, his last base, the Doom Mountains. Trapped in battle, Sauron was forced to fight himself, slaying the human Emperor Elendil on the battlefield, and shattering his holy sword of Nasir. However, Isildur, the prince of Elendil, picked up the shard of the holy sword, cut off Sauron's fingers with it, and took the One Ring. Sauron, who lost his strength, was annihilated on the spot, and the troops also fled in all directions. After the battle, Elrond the Elf King suggested that Isildur throw the ring into the flames of the Doom Mountains. Because the Lord of the Rings was forged by the Doomsday volcano of Mordor, and only the flames of the Doomsday Mountains can completely destroy it. But Isildur was bewitched by the power of the ring and decided to keep the ring. He soon discovers that the ring grants him invisible powers, but as soon as the ring is removed, this ability disappears. The half-orc troops found him who had disarmed him, and took the opportunity to kill him. The ring then fell to the bottom of the Anduin, where it remained silent for thousands of years, until Groom became its new master. Like the previous holders of the ring, Groom was also bewitched by the power of the ring. He turned out to be a creature similar in appearance to the Hobbit, but the fallen power of the Lord of the Rings distorted his mind and deformed his body. He finally hid in the orc lair in the Misty Mountains until the Lord of the Rings was killed by Bilbo Baggins. Get. When the Hobbit Bilbo Baggins accidentally got the Lord of the Rings, he did not know that the fate of the world rests in his hands. After Bilbo's birthday party, Gandalf told Frodo that Sauron, the Dark Lord, had known that his ring was in the hands of the hobbits. Sauron is rebuilding the fortress of Barad-dûr, gathering countless orcs, preparing to seize the Lord of the Rings with an army, and conquer the world. He also told Frodo that the power of the ring would corrupt the bearer, and there was only one way to go. To destroy the ring, it must be thrown into the flames that forged it, the Doom Mountains and Sauron's lair. So, Frodo went far away to avoid disaster. He and fellow countrymen Sam, Pippin, Merry went through danger, and together with the ranger Aragorn, whom he met halfway, they got rid of Sauron's minions, the Black Knights. These knights are also called the Nazgul, and came to Rivendell. Elf King Elrond of Rivendell called a meeting of representatives of the resistance, and decided to send the ring to the Demon Lord's lair to be destroyed. So the 4 hobbits, Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas the elf, Gimli the dwarf, and Boromir the human set out to destroy the ring. The expedition passed through Moria, the hometown of dwarves, and was attacked by the ancient Balrog. Gandalf fell into the abyss. The expedition passed through Lorien, the elven territory, and sailed down the Anduin River. On the shores of Lake Nancy Thor, the expedition was attacked by strong orcs sent by the evil white-robed wizard Saruman. Boromir was killed, and Merry and Pippin were captured. Frodo and Sam decided to go to Mordor alone, while Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli followed in the footsteps of the orcs, trying to rescue Merry and Pippin. Frodo and Sam were followed by Gollum, hunted by the ring wraiths, and attacked by the enemy, and he had to resist the growing temptation of the Lord of the Rings. The two climbed the mountains and waded the water with Gollum, met Boromir's younger brother Faramir, and finally came to the foot of the Shadow Mountains outside Mordor, and Gollum, who was obsessed with the Lord of the Rings, also thought of killing people and stealing treasures. Merry and Pippin finally escaped from danger. They were rescued by the treemen in Fagin Forest, and finally encouraged the treemen to capture Saruman's hometown of Isengard. The 3 of Aragorn also met Gandalf, who thought he was dead, in Fagan Forest. He had risen from a grey-clothed mage to a white-clothed mage with higher mana. The four rescued Theoden, the king of Rohan, who was bewitched by Saruman. At this time, Saruman sent a large army to attack Rohan, and Theoden and others hid in Helm's Deep for resistance. Finally, Gandalf arrived in time with reinforcements, and he destroyed Saruman's army. The monarch Sauron assembled the Army of Darkness and prepared to attack the Kingdom of Gondor, the largest resistance stronghold. The final war is about to start, and mankind is facing the greatest test in history. Gandalf and Pippin rushed to Gondor to assist the Gondorites in resisting Sauron, and the army of Rohan also came to the rescue after receiving the emergency beacon. At this time, the elf king Elon brought the reforged holy sword of Nasir and told Aragorn to go to the White Mountains as a human emperor to seek the help of the undead army. At the last moment of the decisive battle, the army of Rohan and the army of the undead led by Aragorn solved the crisis in the capital of Gondor. Aragorn decided to go to Sauron to fight in order to buy time for Frodo to destroy the ring. Human courage, strength, enthusiasm, and loyalty were manifested at this time, and they launched an attack on the Army of Darkness. At this time, Frodo and the others went through hardships and dangers, and finally came to Mount Doom. The closer he gets to his final destination, the heavier the burden will be on Frodo, who must rely on Sam and Gollum. In the end, under the test of the Lord of the Rings, after a fight with Gollum, the Lord of the Rings was finally thrown into the lava. The demon Lord Sauron was defeated, and the whole Middle-earth world was saved. Aragorn became king of Gondor and married the elven princess Arwen. Frodo and the four hobbits became respected heroes who saved the world. Without suffering, there is no victory, only sacrifice can achieve freedom. The experience of destroying the Lord of the Rings is a journey to test humanity and a mission that must be completed. The ending is a beautiful triumph, but it is also accompanied by a regrettable loss. The four hobbits returned to their hometown of the Shire, but Frodo was eventually tortured by pain and left Middle-earth, and followed the elves to the fairyland to heal his wounds with Gandalf and Bilber. Recommend a friend a novel imprint, very good. Introduction: the tech giant was kidnapped by accident. After perished together, in another time and space, his own soul was reborn. The title of genius for a lifetime was erased, and the only thing in exchange was the word waste wood. It's ridiculous, the power of technology can't be ignored by you. A world that belongs to the sealer. This is the innate ability of everyone, engraved. Only by cultivating it to be stronger and higher can you be qualified to stand at the top of the world. An ordinary green leather passenger car is running on the railway in western China. Clang clang clang. A young man in his 20s sat on a window seat, staring at the increasingly desolate world outside. He listened to the monotonous sound of wheels, and his eyelids couldn't help but start fighting. This person's surname is Lin and Yufei, and the destination of his trip is Hashi on the edge of the desert. The city is a tourist city, and the most famous entertainment is to enjoy the desert scenery. Of course, the so-called view of the desert scenery is just a few kilometers deep into the desert to have a look. Although Lin Yufei also wants to enter the desert, he is not going to enjoy the scenery. What he wants to do is to cross the desert on foot. This is a tourism project specially arranged by his immortal master to further hone his physical strength. Run! The bomb is about to explode. Don't panic. The police are dealing with it. The sudden shout woke up the sleepy Lin Yufei. He rubbed his eyes and looked in the direction of the source of the sound. The noise is getting closer and closer, and the people in the previous car are frantically pouring into this car. Panic spread with the flow of people, and some people sitting in the front were also infected. As the crowd left their seats and ran to the back car, the scene was very chaotic. Lin Yufei grabbed a man who ran by and asked, "What happened? What are you arresting me for? Let go." The man was caught and was very anxious. He threw it a few times and found that he couldn't break free. He said in a crying voice, "Let go, there is a bomb in front of the gangster, please let it go." Explosion. What to do? As he struggled, his eyes turned red, and tears began to swirl in the corners of his eyes. This cowardice made Lin Yufei very helpless, so he had to let go of his hand and let him escape. But the word bomb aroused Lin Yufei's curiosity. At this time, the carriage in front was empty and there was no one. Lin Yufei left his seat and walked forward, trying to figure out what happened. Walking through a carriage, Lin Yufei saw several fully armed marshals holding guns nervously, all pointing at a big man in the middle of the carriage. The big man clutched a young woman's hair tightly in one hand, and held a remote control in the other hand, and said with a ferocious expression, "Stop! If I don't stop, I will detonate." His shirt was open, revealing a row of detonators from the inside, and the woman he restrained seemed to have been frightened and was sobbing in a low voice. "Calm down, parking takes time, you put the hostages first." A marshal with the appearance of a leader shouted to the big man, and at the same time, he waved his hands to the colleagues behind him, motioning them to back away slowly. Seeing this scene, Lin Yufei understood the reason for the panic of passengers. Few people are not afraid when encountering such a thing. Lin Yufei was naturally one of the few people who were not afraid. Seeing that the gangster's attention was all attracted by the marshals, he quietly crouched down under the seat and slowly approached the gangster. The gangsters were hostage, and the marshals were afraid to use firearms. At present, the best way to deal with this gangster is to subdue him by surprise, and Lin Yufei is planning to do just that. The space under the train seat is not large, and it is very difficult for people to move under the seat, but the narrow space provides good concealment, and neither the gangster nor the marshals noticed Lin Yufei, who was moving slowly. He finally moved silently under the seat next to the gangster. The gangster was facing the row of seats with his back, and he didn't see anyone hiding under the seats. Lin Yufei slowly got out from under the seat, and held his breath waiting for the opportunity between the two rows of seats. Just when the back of the gangster's head was facing him, Lin Yufei stood up suddenly and placed a palm on the back of his head. Click sounded softly. The gangster's eyes were bulging, and blood immediately spewed from his nose and ears. His threatening voice stopped abruptly, and he fell to the ground neatly and died. The remote control slipped from his hand, and Lin Yufei grabbed it in his hand just before it fell to the ground. The marshals were stunned by this scene, but they quickly recovered and realized that it was an expert who had taken action to solve the tricky gangster. After the forensic identification, the gangster died on the spot due to a skull fracture. Although Lin Yufei killed people, because the criminal behavior of the gangster has exceeded the limit of infinite defense, although he killed people, he will not cause any trouble, and his courageous behavior has been generously rewarded by the local public security. Lin Yufei walked out of the Public Security Bureau proudly carrying a thick stack of banknotes. He saw a plainly dressed woman walking towards him. The woman was wearing a white shirt and grey trousers, and her face was actually very beautiful with light makeup on. She walked up to Lin Yufei and said softly, "Thank you, sir, for saving me today." Lin Yufei recognized that she was the woman who was kidnapped today, waved his hand and smiled, "You're welcome, this is what should be done." The woman smiled lightly, looked at him with admiration, and said with admiration, "Mr. must be a martial artist." It was like in a movie when he was in the car. In the face of the beauty's praise, Lin Yufei felt a little proud in his heart, but he said, "It's too much, it's just embroidered legs." The woman shook her head and said, "No, sir, my surname is Yang, and my name is Yang Wangking. I want to invite you to dinner to express my gratitude. You must not refuse." Her invitation was very sincere. Lin Yufei felt that there was nothing important to him anyway, so he nodded and agreed, "My name is Lin Yufei, in fact, it is me who should treat the guest today." Said, Lin Yufei patted his bulging pocket. If his master sees his current performance at this time, he will definitely slap him on the head and curse, "Idiot! You didn't realize such a big flaw, and you can't find Bai Bei if you are praised." The woman's sentence just now was very flawed, because he also had his back to Lin Yufei at that time. How could he have seen Lin Yufei beat the gangster? But at this time, Lin Yufei was immersed in the sense of accomplishment of doing justice and courage, and ignored this problem for a while. The woman covered her mouth and smiled and said, "I'll invite you today, but you can invite me another day. How about we go to the Hungli Hotel?" Lin Yufei was not familiar with this place, so he shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's up to you, I'm not familiar with this place." The two stopped a taxi and soon arrived at the Hungli Hotel. This is a very beautifully decorated hotel, business is very good, and many customers come in and out. The decoration of the hotel is very tasteful. On the surface, the decoration is gorgeous, but it is not vulgar in the gorgeousness. The woman smiled and said to Lin Yufei, "Mr. Lin, I have reserved a box in advance, you can come with me." He listened to the woman's words and replied, "It's not bad here. It's rare that you are thoughtful, so please ask first." The two followed the waiter to the box reserved by the woman. The box is located in a corner of the second floor of the hotel. It is small in size and elegantly furnished. The woman was very thoughtful and ordered some dishes before coming here. She handed the menu to Lin Yufei and asked, "Mr. Lin, what else do you want to add?" Lin Yufei casually flipped through the menu and said with a smile, "Miss Yang, I won't add any more. These are enough on the table, and they are all special dishes here." The woman smiled and nodded and said, "If it's not enough, add more." Then she said to the waiter, "It's time to serve. Get another bottle of red wine, the Great Wall Dry Red, the kind that tastes soft." The waiter turned and left, and in a short while he brought a bottle of red wine and 2 goblets. After the waiter opened the wine, the woman waved him to leave, and then gracefully poured 2 glasses of wine. She handed a glass of wine to Lin Yufei, then raised her glass and said with a smile, "Mr. Lin, in order to thank you for your life-saving grace, I will toast you first." She raised her glass and drank it happily, then looked at Lin Yufei with a smile. Lin Yufei admired her boldness very much, and not to be outdone, he raised his glass and gestured, "Miss Yang is a good drinker, I admire it." After he finished speaking, he raised his head, drank the wine in the glass, and put the empty glass on the table. Seeing him finish drinking, the woman smiled slightly and said a few words in a low voice with her mouth open. Lin Yufei felt that his head was a little heavy. Seeing that her mouth moved but no sound was heard, he sighed in his heart that this red wine was so powerful. He shook his head, trying to wake up, but things backfired. After he shook his head, he suddenly felt that the world was spinning, his vision became blurred, his eyes darkened, and he passed out.